both to your neighborhood in which we are sitting and to the entire city. So I'll just give a couple of preliminary notes here. Thank you so much to PCC for having us here, to Dr. Vardian and his staff. It's a great venue. It's also a good one to videotape and to stream live. So it sounds good, George, does it? Okay, good. We at the Star News, we're happy to take on this role this time around. The neighborhood associations and all didn't seem to be having any forums or debates, and so we decided to step in, and I'm really glad that we did. Thanks so much to our marketing department, to Bill Van Lanningham and to Julie Corlett, who really did all the heavy lifting here. Brian Haar is here, who's the senior editor of the Pasadena Star News and the San Gabriel Valley News Group, and thanks to him for being here. There's a little change from the program, which was that a fellow who was going to be up here asking questions realized, while I didn't, that he needed to be covering this, and it was going to be very hard for him to be doing that and scribbling while asking questions. So Jason is not as advertised up here on the podium. He's scribbling. And I'm joined by my longtime colleague, Steve Scazzillo, who's a longtime reporter, formerly an editorial writer. Now he's on the news side, although you enjoy his column, I'm sure, about the outdoors and bicycling and his coverage of the environment here in the San Gabriel Valley. So Steve and I have worked together for decades, and I'm really glad to have him up here. He lives in Pasadena, as do I, as does Jason, but none of us live in the district, and so we can't vote, but we enjoy your district. I drive through it every Tuesday night, and I look at the signs. And I come home from yoga, and I drop my friend off who lives in the district, and then I count the signs. So it's been an exciting race. It was an exciting primary race, and this runoff is equally expensive and exciting. And so we're really glad to be here to help air out some of the issues. So just a little of the format. We're going to, those of you filled out questions know that you're going to get your say, your questions in as well, but we're going to have a 90-second introduction from each of the candidates. We flipped a coin, which I flipped badly, but it came up heads anyway, and so Andy's going to give his first, Phil second. We'll reverse that. We'll go through the questions, and that means we'll switch the orders of answering when we ask questions, and then we'll reverse that order for the final statements. We don't have an exact timeline, although we'll certainly hope to end before 8:30 so that everybody can go out to dinner on South Lake Avenue. Again, welcome. And I will be the timer here. Oh, also, and the candidates know this, but there's if either of them hears something and the other guys answer that they disagree with, or they feel that their position on something has been mischaracterized, they can say point of order or whatever, some councilmanic thing like that, and they can get a rebuttal in for 30 seconds. So I won't be gonging, but I would like to keep people within those time frames. So we're really, I haven't concentrated enough on the candidates here. We're really glad and appreciative of your both being here, of your time, of your willingness to take on this task of running for council. Pasadena is a very active place. You all come from a legacy from Bill Thompson and Sid Tyler and Terry Tornick. Have all preceded you in my time, and a lot of great people before that as well. It's an important neighborhood of Pasadena. This is an important post. It's an important time for Pasadena. So Steve and I will look forward to asking the questions, but first the introductions from the candidates, and that means Andy Wilson, who is, so far as we know, no relation to me, by the way. I sometimes need to bring that up.
If you go far enough back.
No cousins. You go back into the Highlands of Scotland and there was something, but so Andy's no relation, nor is Phil, so far as I know. Andy, take it away.
Right. First of all, thanks. It's great to be here. It's frankly been a tremendous honor to be your city council person here in District 7 for the last 22 months. Soon after Liz and I arrived in Pasadena 21 years ago, we realized Pasadena was really an extraordinary place, and I committed myself to serve as part of kind of my life values here. I quickly took on roles at Pasadena Heritage, Pacific Oaks College and Children's School, Innovate Pasadena, which is focused on high-quality job creation. Then I got asked by our then Mayor Mayor Bogart to serve on the Design Commission, Planning Commission, and then our Tree Protection Committee and a bunch of other responsibilities in the city. These efforts have made a difference in our city. We've preserved historic buildings and neighborhoods. We've saved numerous trees. We've brought hundreds of great jobs to Pasadena. And frankly, we've improved our transit infrastructure to avoid getting around with cars as much. This demonstrated commitment has won me the support of many respected community leaders, the mayor, our congresswoman, state assemblymen, and many colleagues on the council. I'm very proud of our work, but realize we have more work to do. So I'm seeking a full 4-year term. I'd like to focus on limiting the amount of development and pace of that, improving the quality and scale of what we do build, addressing traffic and congestion, getting around without cars, enhancing public schools so all kids have great opportunities, and bringing more quality jobs to Pasadena. Frankly, community leadership is about doing, not just talking. So the big difference between me and Phil is that I've been doing for 20 years, and I look forward to having the next 4 years to continue to represent you.
So that's 90. 90 seconds, you hit it pretty well.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andy. Phil.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Hosp, and I'm running to be your District 7 Council Representative. I grew up here in the Pasadena area. I attended Loyola High School, went back east to Boston University to attend college, where I majored in business and worked for 3 years for the Democratic chairman of the Ways and Means Committee of the Massachusetts State Senate. After college, I went on into the military, where I served as an officer for 4 years. I served 2 tours in Iraq, which I consider some action, and earned the Bronze Star. I returned here to Los Angeles to attend law school, which is where I met my beautiful wife, Vivian. We currently live in Pasadena in Madison Heights, and I work as an attorney at the international law firm of Locke Lord. I'm running because I love this city. For over 50 years, people in my family, my dad, myself, my grandfather, have either worked, lived, or gone to school here in Pasadena. My 2 daughters were born down the street at Huntington Hospital, and my future son will be born there in a couple months. So, sorry, wow, that hit me out of nowhere. In September. So the reason why Pasadena is so great is because it is a big city that offers great attractions, but really has an aspect of a small town community feel. And I think feeling is what we're all about. We value our small businesses. We value our nature. We value close community relations where we know the guy at the drugstore. We have a family account. We can send our kids up the street without having to worry about anything happen to them.
So that's 90, but we'll give you a baby bump in there for a second.
I got the clap, so.
Yeah.
We value our parks and ease of travel. So the choice in this election, in my view, is very clear. It's first change versus status quo. Neighborhoods are the heart of Pasadena, but too often what we want is put aside for people with business ties to the city and people with connections to city council
I'll cut you right there.
So I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. Well put. So we're going to go back and forth on the questions that Steve and I have put together, and because Andy started first there, then we'll have Phil take the first answer to Steve's question. Steve's going to start us out, and take it away, Steve.
Okay, so Phil will start first, and then Andy, both have a chance to answer the question, about 90 seconds each. LA Metro has recently received funding from the voters that guarantees $120 billion from Measure M over 40 years. A substantial portion of that, about 17%, goes to cities for local projects. How would you suggest that this new revenue source be used for transportation in Pasadena?
Well, transportation is an important issue because, quite frankly, I don't think anybody here feels like traffic has gotten any better. Over the past 5 to 7 years, it seems just to get worse every year. So what I would start with is a common sense traffic study that actually measures the traffic and measures it according to how people feel. It measures it like when I come off my street on Euclid, I want that traffic study not to just measure the amount of cars that go through the intersection, but to account for the fact that traffic is so backed up down Glenarm that it takes me 15 minutes to get to one side of the train track to go drop my daughters off at school, and then 15 minutes to get to the other side of the train track. I don't care what people say, those train tracks are definitely not timed. So it seems like they're timed for all the wrong situations. So I think a traffic study is the first thing. I think spending resources on crosswalks to make, we talk about walkability, but I think starting from the basics is a good place to start, where we put crosswalks in. So like Cordova, we have, and they just put like a sign on Glenarm I'm thankful for, because crossing over to Allendale Park was like playing Frogger with the cars, but putting in crosswalks that light up so drivers know when pedestrians are crossing. So doing basic things rather, and starting from the basics, and that would be where I would begin.
All right, thank you. Andy Wilson.
Sure. So very excited about Measure M. We're grateful for the work that Metro's done so far. Some of those dollars have come back to our new protected bike track, our pending bike share program that will come this summer. Those are Metro dollars from previous bond measures. As you know, Steve, the best rapid transit line has already been identified as one of those Measure M lines to the North Hollywood area. So we know there's demand there. I'm hoping that will connect to Burbank Airport. One of the things that I love to do, and I'm not sure it's going to happen, we all have fantasy days. I would love to take some of those dollars and take that at-grade crossing at Gold Line at Glenarm, California, and Del Mar. That would be a gift to our community, and I think that's something we've all struggled with. But transit is a system, and I think figuring out where people are going and where they're coming from, optimizing the ability for people to get around. I'm a big fan of walking, as people know. The schools, this PCC is the largest generator of traffic in our city. Where are those students coming from? How do we get here smartly? How do we leverage the Gold Line station? How do we get the kids who are coming large distances in transit out of their cars so Phil and I and our kids can walk to work safely? My kids could get to school without sitting in line in a minivan, and could ride their bike. So there's no easy answers about traffic. Having a resource like Measure M, I think, is critical. I'm excited about what we can do. I think we've just started. I'm a big fan of active transit, work closely with the Complete Streets Coalition, and do have the endorsement of Bike to Vote LA. So getting us out of our cars and fighting traffic, I think this is a very important tool to have in our arsenal.
Thank you.
By the way, you guys, both of you hit within a couple seconds, 90 seconds on that reply. So that's the right kind of tempo. People talk about transit and traffic in this campaign. They also talk about development. New development, particularly multifamily development, has been a huge issue in this campaign. Few Pasadenans probably consciously back overdevelopment, too much building on too little land. Most of us know the laws of supply and demand, realize there's a huge housing shortage in the city and in Southern California, and know that that drives rents sky high. What's the best way forward for new building, residential and commercial as well, for Pasadena? So that's, we're going to Andy first, right?
I'm sorry, what was the end part that you lost?
Sorry, what's the best way, and most of it was rambling. The key of the question is, what's the best way forward for new building, residential and commercial as well, for Pasadena?
Yeah, I do think modest and measured growth in our city is important to maintaining that vibrancy. I'm not a pro-growth person by any means, but I do like having good restaurants and places to go to, so I can avoid driving my car to go all across LA to have interesting things. So having housing and some commercial uses, I think, is important. Doing that in a measured way. As you know, we just updated our general plan, and I think the voices of the people were loud and clear. We had 200 meetings and spent about $6 million on that. And the first thing that came out of that was to pull the reins in terms of what development capacity is, and I think that was a good move. That also protected 2/3 of our neighborhoods as off limits for development, and I think those are the most precious resources. I feel privileged to live in a place like Pasadena, and certainly a wonderful neighborhood like Madison Heights. But we do need to accommodate growth. I worry about where our kids will live. This is an extraordinary city, and I think we have a duty to think about offering opportunities for other people beyond ourselves to afford living here. So having some housing, I think the Central District does lend itself to that model. Obviously, the ability to use mass transit is much more conducive to that. Walking without getting around in your car. I just read that a multifamily unit produces 2/3 less carbon in our universe or an environment than a typical single-family house. So I think being smart about the environment, focusing development, slow growth in the downtown is super important to allowing some capacity and frankly relieving a little pressure on what's escalating cost of living and home prices and rental prices in Pasadena.
Okay, thanks very much. Phil?
Larry, I think before I get on, but I think the premise of the question is, the laws of supply and demand. And I think the fallacy of that whole premise is, that you put in one unit of housing and you're going to house somebody and then take them off the street, when in fact you have a market overseas that is purchasing units. Nobody's living in there, and they're not taking people off the street. Granted, they're putting in a small number of affordable housing, but so this isn't a traditional supply and demand type market where you relieve one unit by putting in, or you give one person a home and that person comes off the street. So that's one thing. The second thing is, that's why I started running, because the people in the general plan, their main thing is to maintain the small town community feel here in Pasadena. And that's not happening. It's not happening for a couple reasons. One, we're building these buildings that block, views of the mountains, that ruin the human scale experience that we have from the street. They're taking these buildings, putting them in, they're ruining our experience in terms of traffic. They're clogging it. So just building a building out of the neighborhoods, that doesn't mean it doesn't affect the neighborhoods. What affects the neighborhoods is the horrendous amount of traffic, because quite frankly, I don't walk to work. I don't think a lot of people do. And you know what? We can't plan for these pipe dreams that really don't exist yet. We need to plan for now. And these buildings are out of scale. They don't reflect the architecture and quality of the neighborhoods that they're going into. And then, probably most importantly, the community is not being engaged. And the Thatcher project is the perfect example where you have a medical building that has been there since 1928 that was designed for the specific purpose to be the premier medical building in the city. You have one patient seen every 12 seconds at that building. You have about 200 doctors, physicians, and their staff that work there. That building that went in there, they just jammed it in and told the doctors days before that hearing at the city that, oh, well, here's what we're going to do.
Okay, that's 2 minutes.
So there you go.
Okay, thank you both. Steve?
Okay, we'll continue with these quality of life issues, which I think is really what it's all about.
Yep.
Pasadena recently was named Tree City USA for the 27th time in a row this year. You can applaud, I guess. There are 65,000 urban trees here. That doesn't even count parks here at PCC or schools. While the city says we love our trees, 3 70-year-old parkway trees were cut down on South Lake Avenue by court-ordered consent decree last fall. Another 2 were chopped down illegally by a developer at midnight over in Old Pasadena. The developer was fined. Some say that amounted to a slap on the wrist. Are you concerned about the urban tree forest?
Sorry.
If so, what would you do to change the city policies regarding the trees? And what do you think of fines up to $10,000? Do you have any new ideas about this issue? We'll start with.
So we're starting with Phil on that one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would find business owners on a percentage based on the value of the property or the value of the trees. There has to be a way to, it has to be punitive. You have to make it a disincentive for people to cut down trees. And so that there's, I mean, the Twin Palms thing is crazy. I mean, it's just inexcusable. That person shouldn't be allowed to do business in Pasadena.
No palms, 0 palms.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. South Lake trees, there's another example of a situation where we had a developer come in and essentially hold the city hostage with a lawsuit. And You know what? The lawsuit, we had filed, we were on the offensive on that lawsuit. There was no reason for the city to cave and settle. You have to put a price on these trees. You have to be willing to fight for them. And if you're just gonna look at how much a lawsuit costs you, you're not really putting a lot of value in your urban forest. So in that situation, what we should have done is fought. And Mayor Tornick voted no to tear down those trees. Tyrone Hampton voted no to tear down those trees. So the first step would have been, no, don't tear them down. We're fighting this because you know what? Those trees were here before your building, and you should have factored that in the first place. So the second thing is, we should be honest with the public about how we voted and what is going on at City Hall. That wasn't the case here. We had, it was behind closed door session, and because I happen to be a lawyer, I know the law that once a judgment's entered, that becomes a public record. So I popped a public records request, and lo and behold, here we go and find out who voted which way. And that wasn't being communicated to the public. And then the third issue was when they tore out the trees. You know what? You had residents sue the city, and then at midnight, when the city supposedly told them they weren't going to do anything, they came in with bulldozers and tore it down. I was here at 2 o'clock in the morning when it happened. And it is, if I were a council member, I would be calling people right then and there to stop it. Because whatever staff person approved that is going against what the residents want, and the residents' right to bring a lawsuit and try and enforce the very rights that they have. And that would, without using foul language, make me very angry.
Time.
So that's it.
Thank you, Phil.
All right.
Andy.
Andy Wilson.
So trees are one of those things that I think are an extraordinary aspect of our city. I served on UFAC, which is our Tree Protection Commission, for multiple years, and frankly, recently voted to enhance the penalties. And Phil's right, the fines associated with tree removal are greatly inadequate, and we've now moved forward in making them closely aligned with the replacement value of those trees, and they will go up. Stephen, you and I spoke about that fairly significantly. I think that's a right move. I think part it's also getting the right tree in the right place. We have a bunch of handicap and kind of people who have accessibility problems, and some of the tree choices have made it difficult for them to get around, had impact on sidewalks. So I think being smarter about our trees, getting our master tree plan right needs work. I've changed out trees in that way as well. I do think I should address South Lake, because I think, I would imagine that Phil, who is a lawyer, would get this right. We resisted that lawsuit and the removal for a long time. And the reason we have a closed-door session, and Phil should know that, we're required by law when it's litigation to have a closed-door session. And we fought that lawsuit. Experts came in and excavated the sidewalk, and we found out that hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage were being done to that property. And guess what? When the judge tells you that you must settle, otherwise he's going to have an adverse ruling against the most important protection tool we have, which is our tree protection ordinance, you think twice about going to court where a judge tells you you're going to lose. So if the most important tool is our tree protection ordinance, and a judge warns you that that ordinance is going to be overturned if you go to court, the prudent thing to do was to go settle with that landlord, not a developer, landlord, allow those trees to be removed. He paid for those trees. And by the way, I agree with you, they weren't done. I thought the removal was terrible. But have those trees removed, allow the landlord to pay for the largest replacement tree, and repair the sidewalk. Sometimes the tough choice is the right choice. That was a tough choice.
Okay.
That was a tough choice.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, right.
Can I respond?
Sure. Rebuttal. Okay, our first rebuttal. This is a
Yeah,
cardinal
the first
moment.
rebuttal.
Okay.
So we had a motion for judgment on the calendar, and for those of you who don't know, we were asking the court to decide in our favor. The judge did not tell us that he was going to rule against the ordinance. That's a fallacy and just excusing your conduct on, taking advice from the city attorney. The only reason I mentioned the closed-door session is because the talk after the trees got cut down didn't really match up with the votes. Mr. Wilson voted to tear down the trees, but then after the closed-door session, it was revealed, he was telling people how sad, and, be honest with people, be upfront. If you're gonna make the hard decision, which, cases has to be made, be upfront that you're making the hard decision.
Okay.
But don't try and deceive people, tell you did
Time.
differently.
Larry, I think it's only appropriate.
Rebuttal to the rebuttal
and
coming
we'll
up.
stop there.
Rebuttal to the rebuttal, okay.
There is a public record, and by the way, I can't disclose and couldn't disclose because of attorney-client privilege what happened in our closed session. Phil should know that. But more importantly, when the landlord, because I petitioned and I sent 1,400 signatures, and I was out there, once again, I am adamant about protecting our trees, and I say not all of our decisions are easy ones, but sometimes the right ones are the ones you take the most heat for. Ultimately, it was clear that that judge was not going to hold up our position. And a negative ruling against our tree protection ordinance would be a life sentence for the most important thing we have, protecting trees. I disagree with Phil on this.
Okay, they are both tree people.
We all have our fans.
The next question is going to be Andy first. Should Pasadena do more to protect the undocumented? Recently, the city council passed a resolution saying it is not cooperating with ICE, with the exception of fighting terrorism and other special instances. Would you support formally turning Pasadena into a sanctuary city? Andy first.
Absolutely. This is an incredibly important issue, and I think having sat through hours of public testimony about people who are terrified living in our city who are undocumented. They're an important part of our community. We have a very large Latino population. We have working people in our city, probably in some of our own houses, who may not be here legally. I think they're part of a fabric of our community. So I am prepared to protect those people. I think it's... And we took action at the city council to make sure that people don't live in fear from our own police. Do not live in fear from our own police. They are residents of our city. And many of them, if you read the stories, are absolutely horrifying, of parents being exported in front of their kids for misdemeanors. And I don't think it's appropriate for our police department to be part of a regimen of fear. I respect the diversity of our city, and I think the action we took was appropriate. However, we didn't officially become a sanctuary city, and you asked me why. I think there's high-profile, coordinated actions around human trafficking, drug trafficking, money laundering that we need an opportunity to coordinate with ICE and Homeland, and I refuse to take that away from us. The Rose Parade is very important, and the safety of the Rose Parade is dependent on that collaboration. So I think shutting ourselves off entirely from any communications would have been a bad idea. However, I would tell you that it's important, and I think the sanctuary city, if we did declare ourselves, I think it's a bit disingenuous, because immigration enforcement, even if we tell the PD that they can't do it, ICE can show up in front of someone's own doorstep and remove them. And if I tell a citizen that they're safe because they're in a sanctuary city and they get carted away, there's nothing more horrible than that. Look at what happened on United Airlines. That is a horrible state of people being dragged away. And I refuse to tell people that they're 100% safe in our city when we can't guarantee that. So I think being honest with the citizenship was one of the things I thought about why I think that nomenclature of sanctuary city was not appropriate.
Time. Who knew that the United thing was going to come into tonight's debate? But
yeah,
we found a way.
how it
Found a way.
worked,
Okay.
We'll see.
Thank you, Andy. Phil.
You know, I don't think we're that far apart on this. And, you know, I
High five, Phil.
I just know, you know, I know this from my personal experience, having a wife who grew up in Tijuana and having family on both sides of the border, having two kids that were subjected to a lot of difficult speech during the presidential race that was completely inappropriate and classified a large part of our family to be criminals and to be people that they aren't, I thought was horrible on behalf of the president's part. I think it was inexcusable and is driving a lot of the fear we're seeing in our community. The undocumented immigrants of our community are residents. We want them to report crimes. We want them to cooperate with the police to solve crimes. So I agree. I do not think it is appropriate for the Pasadena Police Department to be enforcing immigration laws. However, I do think for all citizens, it is beneficial to make sure violent criminals are taken off the streets and that we have measures to fight violent crime. MS-13, other gangs, drug cartels, all these measures are serious violent crimes that I don't think should be protected under our ordinance. But I agree that we need to make sure we're vigilant about protecting citizens, and we need to be responsible as city leaders to make sure we are communicating to them in a way that makes them feel safe.
Very good. Okay,
right.
Steve is next, and Phil will be the first answerer.
Yeah, this first one's for Phil Hosp. Okay. Transit-oriented development, TOD, an acronym you'll never see in the Star News. Anyway, that's the kind of development you've seen for decades, at the Del Mar Gold Line Station, Memorial Park Gold Line Station. This is like commercial and residential development right around the station.
Yeah.
It's touted by some as the antidote to suburban sprawl. In fact, Metro always holds their photo ops at the Del Mar station because they think it's the most beautiful one in all of LA County. Yet, some people deride this and say it's really the Manhattanization of Los Angeles County. So, where do you stand, Mr. Hosp, on that question? And if the goal line has been a boon to the city, has it also created problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I like the Gold Line. I think it's great. And I just think it has brought a lot of problems that we need to address. I'm really disappointed in our city leadership didn't have the long view in mind and put a grade separation at the tracks. I think you have a hospital on one side and residential neighborhoods on the other. Personally, I'm on the way to the birth of my second child. It was between me running that red light and making a left off of that 110 freeway or just waiting for the next train to go through, and I'd rather make the cops mad than my wife. So that's what I did. But I think it has brought questions on how we are going to develop. And transit-oriented development in concept is great. And having, I'm sure it's very convenient to live right above the train tracks, but it is deceiving to have it within half a mile and to consider that to be transit-oriented development, because half a mile within the train track is in my front yard. So, we need to really tighten that up, at least in certain parts of the city, certainly going up Arroyo Parkway, because you have neighborhoods there that are being threatened on the front lines of the development issue, that they're considered transit-oriented development when they're single-family neighborhoods. So that's the one issue. Second issue is the homeless population, and I'm not sure if that's the Gold Line or propositions that have been passed or whatnot, but it's gotten noticeably worse. Our homeless population has gone down, but I think people's experience with the homeless situation has not improved. So that's another thing that needs to be addressed, and at the very least, what it does is it concentrates the population in certain parts near stations and so forth. So like that CVS right there, I mean, I believe the stat was that is one of the top 10 shoplifted CVS in the entire country. And, and it's just astounding how many, there was a killing there. I mean, it is, and that's like, 4 streets over from mine. So, so clearly there are issues, and it's going to take more than a minute and a half to tell you how to solve it.
Okay, time. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Andy, the same question on TOD and the Gold Line.
Yeah, I do think TOD and having development around mass transit makes sense. We hate traffic. Housing expensive. People who are maybe more likely to live in those units would forego a second car. We're seeing that already with behavior around transit-oriented districts. So the model is working. You can just, you can see that every day. Look at the low number of cars that come out of Del Mar Station. Frankly, I'm always surprised by on Westgate how few cars go through back onto Lacey Street. It's incredible. I remember looking at traffic impact studies for that street thinking, oh my goodness, all these buildings here, how can they not have traffic? And they're walking to the Gold Line. So we need housing. We need to get people around. I hate traffic, right? And affordability is an important issue. I would add here that I think this is an opportunity to look at affordable housing further. As people may know, we have something called an inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires developers to develop a certain percentage of their new housing to be affordable, and that's 15%. I would argue that there is a windfall associated with the investment we make as taxpayers in creating mass transit, and that we should look at increasing that inclusionary housing percentage for those units that are getting the benefit, frankly, the public benefit of being near transit, right? So maybe you look at 20% or something like that near transit, and I think that affordability aspect, or frankly, there's people who are probably more inclined to take mass transit. So Not perfect. Phil's right. I think homelessness is a whole different question. I hope you'll ask about that later. But TOD, we need to have a portfolio of solutions. And that's what I've learned from being in city government for 20 years. There's no silver bullets. There's no 140-character tweets that solve these problems. But it's hard work. And you try some things, and some work better than others. And the ones that work, you double down on those. And the one that don't, you say, hey, what did we learn? And you try something else.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take moderator's discretion, and I know that everybody in this room has been here as long or longer than me, but a little more than 21 years ago when Adam Schiff was our state senator, like the Gold Line or not like the Gold Line, we wouldn't have the Gold Line if it was going to be undergrounded at Glen Arm and California and Del Mar, because there was no money for it. And there was a couple-week period in which we were going to have the money or we weren't. So they decided to underground it at Greene and Union in Colorado and build it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have it at all. So again, you can like the Gold Line or not, but that was the way that it got through.
Right.
So no more of those from the moderator. The next question will be first to Andy. Does the Pasadena Police Department need civilian oversight in the form of a police commission or an independent auditor above and beyond the council's Public Safety Committee?
That's a good question. I don't serve on public safety, but I've heard lots of testimony about this. And I have a lot of respect for the police, and they've endorsed me, as have the firefighters. Public safety is the most important service we all receive in the city. It's the largest portion of our budget. So getting that right is important. I think Chief Sanchez does a good job with his command staff, but we don't always get it right all the time. We've had there's even a good police force ends up with situations where the outcomes aren't not what they like. And I think there's an opportunity for learning. I am not in favor of setting up a separate commission. We do have Public Safety Committee, which is a group of council people like myself who are elected by you who've served that purpose. So I think having an alternative group that competes with them who are not elected or not represented by you would be concerning. That being said, I do think there's an opportunity to invest in kind of being introspective. That's kind of how I live my life. Looking at best practices, asking what did we learn, what don't we know. Inevitably, we do hire independent auditors to look at uses of force, Larry. And rather than doing that at a one-off situation, having some kind of organizational capability that can be objective, ask what can we learn, how do we get better, but having a separate commission, I don't think that, I'm not convinced that's the right answer at this point.
Okay, thanks. Phil?
I don't think a commission's necessary. It's more bureaucratic red tape that, quite frankly, is, I think if I police some of the most dangerous cities in the world, and quite frankly, I think it's the job of the elected representatives to make sure that they are being held accountable for how the police are acting. And so I think the residents should have a mechanism in terms of voting and elections if they're not happy with the way that their city council is regulating and the police is operating. So that's, from a resident's perspective, I don't think it works. And from just a pure police perspective, I think you have the Safety Commission, you have independent auditors that do this already. So there's enough investigative oversight. And as a council member, I would have a very hard time finding, sympathizing with a police officer who told me just because his job is dangerous that he somehow can act irresponsibly and use of force that is inappropriate. I did that every single day for 365 days in Baghdad, which was enforce rules of engagement. Make sure your soldiers are disciplined and professional, and advocate for your country by being humane and doing things the right way. And that's certainly how I would expect our police force to act to our residents.
So you were glad you didn't have a commissioner to answer to when you were fighting in Iraq.
Yeah, well, I had a colonel.
You had a colonel anyway. Same difference.
Yeah.
Okay, as Steve, you're next, and the question goes to Phil first.
Right, to Phil Haas first. Back to transportation, and I cover Metro. They're a very powerful agency and very wealthy now.
Thanks to her.
Absolutely.
Tax
Thanks to the
dollars.
taxpayers.
Yes.
Regarding Metro's proposed bus rapid transit fixed route from Pasadena to North Hollywood. I think someone tried to steal my thunder on this one already.
Sorry, Steve.
It's okay. There are two routes being examined for this project, and I'm not sure a lot of people know about it. One is mostly along the freeway on the 134 to Burbank and then to North Hollywood, kind of like the freeway route. And the other would include, Colorado Boulevard, Green Street, Lake Avenue, and it's kind of like a fixed route like the Orange Line is in the San Fernando Valley. It's kind of a big deal. I don't hear much about it. First of all, I want to know, so it's Phil first, what do you think about this? And second, if you say yes to it, which route would you support?
To be honest, I haven't looked at the route, but one thing, so what's going through my mind is transit's an important deal, and if we can piggyback and get a free bus line out of it here in Pasadena to transport people from South Lake, there's a lot of people who work at South Lake that live above the freeway, and so, the more ability we can give them to get to their jobs so that we can, keep our workforce employed and able to work and get home fast, I think that's a good thing. So that's certainly, in evaluating the route, that would be one thing I would consider. And the second thing I'm considering is whether I get not very happy when I get on a bus, when I get behind a bus in a car. So obviously traffic's going to be an important consideration, and whether this bus line, how many buses are running, where they're running to. I'm not sure Colorado's the best place to go, considering the traffic that's already there. But so it is a balance, and based upon that judgment, I guess the freeway would be the second option. If
Okay.
I would lean towards the street option, and unless something showed me different.
All right, great. So Andy.
Yeah, we had a briefing on this recently from Metro. So it is, I think it's $400 million, if I remember, Steve. And the real question in front of us is, how many people ride it, and what problem are we trying to solve? The surface route is more around, it's kind of local transit, right? Kind of stopping frequently, and the freeway route is more commuter, where are people going long distances or less stops. Phil's point around surface impacts to our kind of local streets or surface streets around kind of what I'll call the local transit is a concern. How does that work within our current street system, having large commuter buses kind of sit on top of what we already have? I don't know. We're looking at the analysis, as you know, to see which of these routes make more sense. I guess my gut would say I think that the commuter route seems more appealing to me. I know there's some discussion about that commuter route even connecting to Burbank Airport. So as somebody who thinks about longer distances, and I think we have Pasadena Transit here locally, I think some of the other infrastructure we're building around what's called active transit, around people that get around within our city, maybe would alleviate some of the need for that kind of local transit. I think our local infrastructure can do that, but the longer distance routes where they have a dedicated freeway lane, and that makes sense. I mean, mass transit's great, but it takes me 45 minutes to connect to get downtown, so you do that equation in your head, you're like, no, I'd rather drive. So getting long distances faster, I think is probably a better strategy, but I'm really eager to see what the analysis has to say. And I'm, once again, bus infrastructure is important. We got to try some of these things and see what happens.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
That was great. Larry?
So this next question will go to Andy first. And I'm wondering, when I was thinking about the city, that the three premier shopping and dining districts, South Lake and Old Pasadena and the Playhouse District. So in the 50s and 60s, South Lake was certainly the city's premier shopping and dining district. But in our time, has South Lake lost out to Old Pass and the Playhouse District? And but if it has, would more efforts to spruce it up just drive more vehicular traffic, which we District 7 people hate, to South Lake Avenue? What's the right way forward for South Lake commercially?
Yeah, I'm going to take your word about it was like in the 50s, Phil. Larry. So South Lake is, I think, it's unique for us, and I'm biased because once again, I live in Madison Heights. My kids frequently stop at Pete's and Einstein's for a bagel, and I'm a coffee drinker. So it really feels like it's our neighborhood kind of shopping. I'm a little intimidated by Old Pasadena. I feel like that's great for visitors, and I'll walk there or go with my kids on a weekend. But South Lake really has an opportunity to be kind of our local family-based retail. I don't think imagining it being, re-envisioned with, things like Macy's closing down is realistic. So we have to ask ourselves where the opportunities are. And I've been active both in the business improvement districts and the Playhouse District and South Lake. And I'm pleased to have been involved in bringing new uses like urban plates to South Lake, which my family goes to regularly. Granville is under development, which the restaurant as well. I think kind of activating, there's a couple other kind of, I'd say, restaurants you can go back to. So you can imagine walking up there, riding your bike, stopping on the way back to work. So that's less traffic, and I think more utility for us. And I see more and more families, pushing their kids, and I guess Phil's going to have another kid to push soon. Their strollers up the street, and creating a family retail, shopping, and dining environment through a concept of connected nodes. Like the Colonnade, I think, not the Colonnade, the Commons is a great example of those really working. So imagine that Commons replicated, and then we had those activated nodes, and then people start moving between them. I think the South Lake Business District sees that vision, and I share that with them, and I think we're starting to move in that direction. So I'm hopeful. It may not be what it was like in the 50s, but I think it'll be more relevant to the people and the neighbors and the communities that surround that district today.
Thank you. Okay. Your thoughts, Phil, on South Lake?
My thoughts are that the community is not involved enough in the development of South Lake. I think one of the approaches that our city takes to pretty much everything is that they know better and that they're going to do what they want to do. I think we need to develop a community task force that consists of neighborhood association presidents, of people that are in the business community, of people that have experience, restaurateurs. I mean, I know Granville is a friend of Mr. Wilson's, but we need to bring in all options to South Lake. We need to bring in all ideas. Doing it, having friends that are simply in the business isn't meaning you're getting community engagement. You need to actually get the community involved, stand up neighborhood associations. I know, like Erica, for instance, has been trying to get Madison Heights rocking and rolling, but for some reason it has been not very active in the last year or so. And you need to get them involved. So you need to get a community participation, people that have a stake in the game, because everybody's going to be displeased with a decision or find something wrong with it if they're not involved in the decision-making process. So let the community take ownership of South Lake. Let them be part of the way forward. And I think that's the way to get the best results for that area. But but I do have an idea, Larry. So the idea is in New York they developed, and I hate to compare this to New York for soundbite purposes, but they have this kind of an open farmers market deal. They have one at Grand Center. The Borders bookstore. We need to create senses of place, places where people can go and experience, sitting down at a table, going to get fresh clams, going to fresh fish market, doing something that adds value to their lives and doesn't just serve a function of eating. So I think thinking out of the box and getting those ideas in there is good, but certainly involving the community
Do
is the most
something
important.
with that Borders bookstore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Larry, since I was mentioned in that, I probably should respond.
Go ahead. You were going to say make that into another Ross, Dress for Less? We could have a second.
I hope he says that.
Andy, you have your rebuttal.
Yeah. First of all, Phil mentioned Granville. I have no relationship. I just thought that activating that poor corner where Pompa Furniture was empty for 10 years. So we do have something called the Business Improvement District. They're public meetings. Phil, you've never been to one of those. You may go out and enjoy to see that there's community representatives there, there are business owners, there are retail establishments, there are property owners, and they work every month to try to solve this problem. So I think it's a little disingenuous to kind of put them down. You've never been. Have you been to one of those meetings? No. I didn't think so. My point being that there is a vehicle, and I would encourage, I just appointed another citizen representative on the South Lake Business Improvement District. It does require community involvement. We have vehicles for those. So I would encourage people before they kind of critique that they understand what we're doing and take advantage of that. Certainly the work you mentioned Erica's doing.
Time.
I'll finish at Madison Heights
finish,
in terms of reinvigorating an organization we have is SMART. How do we take advantage of the infrastructure we have and the organizations we have to get outcomes we want?
Very good. Okay, thank you. Next question from Steve is to Phil first.
Just wanted to say something to Phil. I'm from New York, but you might want to use San Francisco's
I
ferry
know,
building.
right? Yeah.
Ferry building.
I know,
right?
sorry.
That
It was
would've
a
been a good
bad
one.
thing. It just came to mind.
The ferry building would have been a good one in San Francisco. Okay.
It's a little bit bigger.
All right. That would be great.
Grand
there.
Central downtown. There you go.
All right. So often when I walk around or report, and I live in Pasadena now, I hear people say, one of the reasons I moved to Pasadena was the proximity to nature. We have incredible nature opportunities right on the edge of our city. Quick list would include the Arroyo Seco, Cajamonga, Eaton Canyon. Yet these places are suffering from fire damage, neglect, frankly, poor planning, too many people visiting maybe. The city has done little to help, and so I'm just wondering, what would you do to give resources or find new ways to improve the wildlife habitat that's in Pasadena and the recreation opportunities for Pasadenans? So.
Sure. And I'll just point out the Granville owner is the same owner of the Thatcher building. So, I mean, they are connected. But the difference
true.
there, I think with the nature here in Pasadena, I mean, I grew up playing in the Berkshire Creek. I grew up collecting, frogs over in Cajamonga, Tom Sawyer Camp, the whole deal. So, I mean, I have a personal connection with nature and linked to, the animals and the resources we have. And one, I think, is support the lawsuit. I think one of the issues we have in Cajamonga is there is a need for sediment removal in Cajamonga due to the fire damage, and but the way that the county is proposing to do it is just incredibly disruptive to the natural environment there. The amount of truck traffic that is going to be that the neighborhoods are going to experience is astounding to haul the dirt and sediment out of there. So I would definitely support that lawsuit. I think protecting the Rose Bowl and the Arroyo versus against the over-commercialization. There's been proposals to get signage going up there, and one of the unique things I think we enjoy in Pasadena is the raw aspect of the natural element. We enjoy like the smell of the trees as you're walking through on the hiking trails there. You enjoy the dust and the smell of whatever flowers growing. So I don't think signage and over-commercialization, I think that's a true threat. And I like the LA County, the deal with redoing the wash. I think that's reinvigorating our water habitats, reinvigorating recreational activities down in the washes is in the basin is definitely a good thing. So there's more, but there you go.
That's great. Okay, Andy, same
Yeah.
question.
I think the big one for us has got to be the Arroyo. I mean, that is our biggest park, and that is where all the activity is. There's so many tremendous uses there, from kids space to the aquatic center, obviously the Rose Bowl itself, and Brookside. And I think everyone in this room has enjoyed those things. But it is being overused in the sense that it's not coordinated. And I was pleased when the mayor put together this task force to look at what should be happening on with the most precious resource for outdoor space and recreation. So I think having a plan, we have a lot of ideas without funding, but at least if we're smart about where we go and think holistically about that resource, I think we'll build great opportunity. Phil's point, community input. What does that mean? How do we want to use it? How do we want to prioritize? I think Phil touched on the Cajamonga. I'm glad that lawsuit has kind of hit had an inflection point of success with the recent judge ruling. I also think the opportunity to leverage some national resources. I'm sorry that we didn't get the opportunity to collaborate more closely with the National Forest Service and the extension of the San Gabriel Mountain Reserve, and maybe an opportunity to look at that. I know we have some other organizations here. I thought I saw John Howell somewhere. Who are really doing great work in our city. And we need to rely on other community organizations. We have so much expertise, and what I've realized, having lived here for 20 years and worked in many of these organizations, they're part of our community. And they have to be part of that solution, Steve. So I would think there's many people, whether it be Nature Conservancy, the other conservation groups, Audubon. I do have the endorsement for the Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters, and it's that collaboration and shared vision. And I think that with a compelling case, you can get resources. I know people in this room will step up to make things happen because they do it in every day for other causes. So no simple answers, but certainly challenges ahead, and I'm excited about getting our plan together for the Arroyo.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Larry?
A shorter question to Andy first this time. Does the governor's lifting of the drought emergency mean that Pasadenans should be able to water their lawns more than once or twice a week?
We have been at a level 2 drought, and we just dropped that a few weeks before, I think the day or two before, Steve probably tracked this, the day or two before the governor lifted the drought. I think the reality is, we are in a desert, and our resources and water is the most important one, ebbs and flows. And we're fortunate, thank God, after I thought it was going to be lifted next year, it happened this year. Of course, Phil and I were walking precincts in the rain, and we're like, why didn't it rain last year? But
Signs.
Yeah, signs. There we go. It's a rainy day. But I think drought, or I'd say water conservation is critical. I've always been amazed, and frankly, this community has done a tremendous job. We use less water today as a city. We use less water today as a city than we did 50 years ago, and our population is 50% greater. And that's congratulations to you guys for being mindful. At building codes, irrigation controllers have really made a difference. So a conservation mentality, I think, is important for sustainability, not just for our quality of lives, but for Phil's new kid who's going to show up. We want them to have a planet that's worth protecting, and water is one of those assets. So mindful water consumption, drought tolerance, it's just a way of life. It's the new normal. I do think, by the way, our water conservation ordinance has been the most restrictive relative to all our neighbors, so I get a lot of heat when we're only watering one day and all our neighboring cities have been an opportunity to water 3 or more days. So we have to balance that as well and educate.
So should we are we changing that? Are
We
we going to be
we're
able to
back
water?
April 1st, you can now water 3 days in the
3
summer.
days?
3 days. It used to be 2.
Okay.
So
3,
welcome.
So this is the first time 3 in a long time.
So I'll tell you, our controller at home is still on one day, and I'd ask you, just because you can use 3 days, don't use it unless your garden needs it, right?
What's the other day than Tuesday and Saturday?
Thursday.
Okay.
But remember,
And there's a bonus if you got that right.
if it rains tomorrow,
Then you can't.
You have a 48-day
48 hours,
prohibition.
yeah.
That's still in place by the
But
government.
if you have a smart control, your control automatically goes off,
Good
and we
point.
subsidize those.
Okay, so Phil, what's
Phil.
your feelings about the water emergency, if we still have one,
I
and how
agree.
the city handled it?
I agree.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I hadn't known, and some of my neighbors apparently never knew, because I saw a lot of Friday and Monday watering in Linda Vista, but I'm sure that never happened in Madison Heights. Okay, Steve, you got the next question.
Okay, another short question. I know you're not
And this
running.
goes to Phil first.
Sorry, Phil first, right. I'm sorry. I know you're not running for school board, but I want to ask you, Phil and Andy, how can City Hall better support the Pasadena Public Schools? And basically, how would you, as a councilman, support PUSD?
I mean, so we need to support the public schools. As a kid growing up here, I certainly know how it is when you don't even consider public school an option. I mean, funny enough, we tried to get my oldest daughter into the public schools because she went in primarily a Spanish speaker, and we got rejected. So I was like, man, this is really, I even got the teacher's endorsement, and that happened. So I thought, it was kind of interesting. But with that said, what we need to do is, like, for instance, like forums like this, was initially proposed out to be at Poly. I have nothing against Poly, but I asked to have it at a public school. So token gestures like that, where you're putting the public schools out in the forefront, community leaders are holding events there, I think is an important thing. The second thing is, I think our teachers need to live closer to the classroom. As it is, they can't afford to live here. So I think, we have a lot of people that are in line for affordable housing. I think we need to front load our teachers. I think more time in the class, less time in the car, and more time as a classroom is something that we need to strive for, because we want the kids in our schools to get all the attention that they can. And then finally, I would just add, we need to start adopting policies that get the middle class back involved in the school system, because truly that's it, right? And there's nothing, right now we're teaching very low income students predominantly, and it's not an indication of their learning ability at all. It is an indication of the fact that, the reality that their parents have 2 jobs and aren't able to dedicate the resources and the time to the public schools. And so we need to start doing programs, and I'm talking just working with the school board, because this is their area. One part's being humble and just kind of, making sure every door is open for them. But getting policies in place to really get the middle class involved, because we want parents involved, we want citizens involved contributing to the schools. So that's how I would approach it.
Just
Great.
a clarification, Phil, about your child. I mean, you all applied to a school of choice and didn't get in, or how did that go?
We applied to the immersion program on San Rafael.
Right.
And
Hey. It was so calm and peaceful all along.
so we applied to the immersion program at San Rafael. And,
And that's a very popular program.
It is, and we
yeah.
thought we would actually have an advantage because my daughter, Julia, speaks primarily Spanish. And the most competition is obviously for primarily English speakers. But we didn't get in, and it's important. My mother-in-law and my wife's family all speak Spanish, so it's important that they learn it. So that was important for us.
Great. Okay. Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Because as far as I know, you could still get into the public
No,
schools
that's right,
in
yeah.
general.
Phil didn't
good
ask me
thing.
for a recommendation.
Okay. And
Andy.
it's Annie's going first.
No, Andy hasn't answered that
No,
question.
yeah.
right?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So absolutely, we do, when we're walking neighborhoods, we do get questions. Phil, you probably got as many as I do about the school system. And I don't think we can, and I'm super proud of our city, I don't think we can have a world-class city unless we have a school system that we all are proud of, and we all feel kind of that it's the best opportunity for our kids. And the school system has made progress, and I'm pleased by that. And I think, frankly, it's not just about education and opportunity for the kids. It's about affordability. It's about affordability. We talk about housing affordability, but imagine layering on top of that the need into being as kind of a parent who wants to give your kids the most opportunity. If you feel compelled to also write a private tuition check, that really is going to squeeze our families out. So schools are important. I understand, and you guys probably know the history better than I do, there is a separate school board, but the city really seems to have understood that, and it's one of our guiding principles now. Guiding principle number 8 is having a great school system, and I think that makes sense. The city started taking action, and I think I'm pleased about that. We have joint meetings with the school board. I see Scott Phelps here as well. There is something called Collaborate Pasadena that's about knowledge sharing. We've invested in joint use facilities for athletic facilities, so when the school is out, those facilities are more attractive and more capacity that the city can use this for after-school programs. Okay, so there's kind of a school strategy. But I'd argue that every one of us, if you believe in this, needs to take personal action. Take personal action. And so what have I done? I've mentored, one of the poorest performing schools in our district was McKinley, and I think, Larry, you're a McKinley grad.
No, my father was.
Your
but
father
I'm an Elliott man.
Yeah,
They had 6 principals in 2 years, 6 principals in 2 years, and an accelerating decline of enrollment. And I met their new principal, Charlie Heaton, and I asked Charlie how I could help. So I now advise Charlie on a regular basis. I speak in his class about civics. I was there last week and talking to his parent summit about parent engagement. We helped I helped put a committee together with Claire Bogard, thank her for her leadership, on restoring the mural in that library. That is a school for the arts. The kids are in a library every day, and this epic piece of art is destroyed by water. What message do we send them about what we think about the arts? So I'm pleased to have been those things. I challenge everyone in this room, if you want to improve our schools, even if your kids are in an independent school, or maybe you're retired, or your kids are out of the house, be proactive.
Time.
Take a role, make our schools the best they can be, make Pasadena the best it can be by being involved in those schools.
Thank you both.
This
Larry?
question will go to Andy first, and then Phil. It's a short one. Who did you initially support for president, and who did you vote for in November?
Wow, I didn't know we were going to get that one.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that in the primary, I voted for our Libertarian candidate, and then voted for Hillary Clinton. And as you know, I'm a Republican, but what Donald Trump represents does not represent any Republican Party that I want to be part of.
Okay. Phil.
right.
I supported John Kasich, and I voted for him. I wrote him in, so I didn't vote. It's really disheartening to see the choices. Both of them, in my opinion, were just not very palatable, just due to the fact that there was a legitimate, I mean, Bernie Sanders, whether you agree with his policies, you got to agree. The guy's, you know, just, he believes what he believes, and he's willing to throw it out there, and that's how our system is supposed to work. And I think there was a candidate on the right that had that as well, and unfortunately, the way the process worked, I don't think the best candidates really got to match up like it should have, so I voted for my candidate.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
one more
the last question is from Steve, and it'll go to Phil first.
Right. Phil, and then Andy. Phil first, staying with politics. What does it say about our local political scene and process running for city council? It's costing each of you on the order of $200,000. As one reader wrote to our newspaper this week, based on information from the Star News, one candidate spent $100 per vote. They probably would have received more votes if they just offered cash.
If they offered cash,
I think that
I
would
don't know
be
if
a
that's
problem.
a strategy you want to employ, but
it's harder than you think.
so money in politics. You know, what do you think about that? I mean, is it necessary evil or?
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary evil. It's just a question of whose money is it. You know, and I've donated $50,000 of my own funds to this because I've refused to take a lot of donations that I felt were conflicting interests with the city. I think during a large budget crunch, I mean, you know, when we met with Fire, they didn't tell you they were going to be negotiating their contract when they were, you know, when the race was running. But so I met with them. But you know, the fact that they're negotiating a contract at the same time that they have 20 firefighters walking for a city council member, that they've donated a record number of donations. I think it's upwards around $20,000. The police have donated upwards around 30. You know, so I think that's an issue in and of itself, just considering the fact that we have such a big budget crunch, and that's one of the problems that we need to address, and you need to be willing to sit at an arm's length transaction with those guys, and at the very least, the public should be able to have the perception that you have good faith negotiations going on.
Okay.
The second thing is, you know, it just astounds. Now I have an independent campaign expenditure against me by, you know, these Innovate Pasadena people. I mean, the amount of people that have vested business interests in the city who are donating money is just, I mean, it is, I think it's almost 200,000. You know, I've raised about 135, like I said, 50 of it, which was my own, but nobody profits off of me getting elected. Nobody makes money on it. It is just residents getting their views heard and wanting the developments to go in to actually benefit the neighborhoods rather than the developers putting them in. And so I think money in politics here in Pasadena, I mean, it's a problem. And I think we've got smart voters. I think we've got a smart constituency who can see it. And so, you know, there's the balance.
All right.
Time. Andy?
So this campaign has gotten awful expensive. This is my first campaign, and it's been an eye-opener. I have to tell you, I was quite appalled by one of the first mailers that I saw from Phil's campaign that was filled with innuendo, allegations, and falsehoods. And the problem is, once someone pollutes the waters, it becomes very expensive to get the truth out. And so I think, you know, the facts of the matter, which I'm happy to talk about, and we have fact-check pages all around my site. There's no conflicts. I'm happy to look you in the eye and tell you that I've worked in the best interest of this community every day for 20 years. Phil has been living in Santa Monica until recently. I've been volunteering every day for 20 years to make our city a better place. And the fact that people now want to support me because I work with them in not-for-profits, many not-for-profits, created jobs in this city, work with homeless people, helped education, that those people come out and support me by sending me checks literally every day, tells you how important it is to be a volunteer and makes this community better. People will come out and back you up. They'll write you checks. They'll walk for you. They believe in what you do. They believe in me because I believe in this city, Phil, and they'll show up and they'll do what it takes. And I'll tell you, I'm pleased to have the support of the firefighters and the police, because I think public safety is the most important thing in our city. And I've been collaborating with them since I joined the council. and I certainly am grateful for their work. Yeah, it's a little awkward, but it's certainly legal. I've not taken a single developer dollar from anyone who's doing projects in Pasadena. I understand that. And by the way, we have very strict legal laws called a Taxpayer Protection Act that prevents me from doing that. So all this sense of conflict is really a smokescreen fulfilled to undermine 20 years of work, tireless work, from me and many people in this community to protect what makes Pasadena great and collaborate and work together. So
Time. Thank you.
I'd
Andy.
like to rebut.
Rebuttal. Okay.
There is conflicts. Innovate Pasadena, until when I started running, Mr. Wilson was approving budgets that gave taxpayer money to his own nonprofit. And he said on his campaign mailer that he was a former board member of the nonprofit, but that's not the case. He's in charge of fundraising. Fundraising, the very job that presents the conflict. And when we pointed it out, he claimed printer's error. It must have been a printer's error. So, that in and of itself is a conflict. It's also conflict when your nonprofit uses city employees who make over $160,000 a year to run it, when the money you've been taking from the city is sitting in a bank account at about $300,000 according to the latest filing. Those are conflicts.
Okay.
Regardless of whether you did something because of it, it's a perception of conflict at the very least.
Rebuttal.
that probably deserves a response.
Rebuttal to the rebuttal.
So Innovate Pasadena is about high-tech, high-quality job creation in our city. If you've been in the high-tech world, there's nothing worse than driving to Santa Monica or Orange County to go to a job. And because I got so irritated about that, I called up the city manager, I called up the president of Caltech, I called up the president of PC and rallied a bunch of tech leaders and said, we need to get our high technology act together. I've never been paid by Innovate Pasadena. I'm a volunteer, and to the contrary, I donate to Innovate Pasadena. So I don't understand, and the city, by the way, our city manager until a year ago was on the board of directors and had been supporting that organization.
Until I pointed it out.
The city manager, could you ask him not to interrupt,
Yeah,
please?
please, no interruption at
The city
all.
manager and the
That's
city,
very
that was
inappropriate.
their dollars, and they put $25,000 a year in, was 10x multiplied by outside independent supporters who care about job creation in our city. I'm pleased with their work. They brought hundreds of jobs to the city. And the fact that I've not benefited and the community has to twist that so to mislead the public for his own personal gain, I frankly think is disgusting.
Thank you.
So
No retort,
the,
Phil. Follow the rules.
no, I think it's why people
Sorry,
came out
no,
here.
sorry, we're not having a
move on.
rebuttal to the rebuttal.
All right.
Just one rebuttal per
Don't want to
rebuttal.
give them what they came here for.
Now we've got some questions from the audience, and the first one is one that we hadn't even considered. This goes to Andy first. I don't know where this number comes from, but the question is germane. Should we have 7 marijuana dispensaries? I didn't think we had any marijuana dispensaries, but in any case, there are cities with marijuana dispensaries in our city. Is this good for our kids and families? Andy first.
So medicinal marijuana has been legal in the state of California for many years. With the voters just approved recreational marijuana. I'm not in favor of that, frankly, but as somebody who doesn't write that rule, we have to figure out how to deal with that. We have banned both recreational marijuana retail facilities and dispensaries in the city. With the ban of dispensaries, there is a whole underground economy of these banned dispensaries that we're constantly chasing down and getting court orders to shut down because they're allowed to operate at the state level. So the idea of how do you manage this? We don't have a good strategy. These are not permitted uses in our city, and we use all the authority we have, and they have to go through due process in order to shut them down. We need a better strategy. I think whether it be regulating, but I'm deeply concerned about the proliferation of an illicit drug in my mind in our community, and I think we need to, I'm concerned about my kids, right? And I think we need to be smart in how we tackle that situation, but what's working right now obviously is not enough. We need better solutions.
Okay, thank you. Same question to you, Phil.
I don't think, outside of Huntington Hospital, I don't think pot dispensaries should be in the city of Pasadena, period.
There you go. Okay.
All right,
Thank you
great.
very much. Now, a question to Phil first from Steve.
Phil first, yeah. This is a really good question from somebody. I cover elections a lot, not in Pasadena, but in other cities, and the question of endorsements always is presented. Some people like to talk about them. So I guess I want to ask Phil first, and then Andy. Tell me, here's your chance. Tell me about who is endorsing you, and more importantly, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think, I'm more concerned about what residents are voting for me, and I'm out to earn the endorsement of individual residents. I mean, I've got former mayors on board, I've got, the teachers, I've got, other, community leaders here, but for the most part, nobody's gonna vote because another person tells them to. I have to be the best man for their own interests, and I think right now, the residents have spoken. I mean, they are concerned about development, and they are concerned about their neighborhoods being infiltrated by more traffic and larger buildings. And certainly there's Dr. Miller, fresh after surgery. He's concerned about his patients. And when you have an Innovate Pasadena person that owns that building and Andy's not giving them notice and not giving them the time of day to, or the ability to fight, it's a bad situation when you either have to sue the city or there has to be an election to get things done around here. And unfortunately, that's been what's going on. And that's why the residents are voting for me, because they're really concerned about it. And actually, turn down record numbers because we're giving them all a voice.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Andy?
I'm highly endorsed, and I'm proud of that. From our congresswoman to our current mayor to our former mayor, Bill Bogart, who's been a key mentor in my life in terms of service. I have a lot of endorsements from community leaders. I have most of the city council who've endorsed me. I know Phil would like to say that I'm paying him off, I'm giving him $100 bills. What that tells you is that when you work with people, regardless of Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative, and make things happen, and you give them the time of day, you hear them, and you look for solutions, they come out and want to support you. Just like they want to write me a check, other people want to put their name on my brochures. I'm flattered. I'm flattered. It is nothing higher than in terms of the respect I show them and my commitment to work with others, regardless of their viewpoint, to make our city better. So I appreciate everyone who stepped forward to be part of my campaign, volunteers, donors, and endorsers. It just tells you after 20 years, you build a village, and that's who comes out, and that's who walks with me on Saturday and Sunday. I don't walk by myself. I walk with my village.
Okay.
And the
Thank you
firefighters.
for that.
Another audience question. This will go to Andy first. Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles has banned private meetings between developers and planning commissioners. Do you think that should happen in Pasadena? Do you think it should extend to city council members as well?
It's a good question. I have frequently when there is new projects coming forward, I like to be informed so I can inform residents. And typically I can tell you what I say. And by the way, just to Phil's question, I remember previewing the Thatcher project and telling that developer that I was concerned about the height in the setbacks from residential neighborhoods. I was not so aware of the doctor's challenges, and I'm empathetic to those challenges. But meeting with developers provides the council person insights into terms of how to guide them so that they do the most appropriate projects. You could say that that's backroom dealing. And there, certainly I suspect in LA where they do spot zoning and they get huge contributions from developers. And I once again assure this group, I don't have contributions from developers who do work in Pasadena. So there's a tension there. I'm collaborative. I'm a person of integrity. It allows me to be more thoughtful and kind of preempt what I think could be a bad project. But I understand why people are uncomfortable with that. I'd be open to exploring that. I'm like, it goes both ways. So it's like everything. There's two sides of that coin. And I'm open to seeing out, what the trade-offs would be. And if people decide that makes sense, I would go with that for sure.
Thank you. Same to Phil.
So my mail is true. No, I think, I think it should be certainly between commissioners. and city council members, absolutely. If they're meeting with developers and talking about development, there's absolutely, I would do that hands down. And the Thatcher building is why. I mean, that, you have to understand, it's not only a question of whether you're have integrity. It's a question of how the public perceives everything. And unless the public is willing to accept what you're doing, I mean, I deal with this as a lawyer. You have to, the appearance of conflicts, you have to show undying loyalty to your client. Appearance matters. And you can be the most, have best integrity, but if you're not doing things in a way in which it appears okay, then the people's confidence in their government is not there. And, a city council member, you're not supposed to be designing plans. You need to be making sure that they go to neighborhood associations. They go to the doctors. They go to the people that live around the Thatcher. Because you don't know what's happening in every neighborhood. I don't know what's happening in every neighborhood. The people that live there do. And the people that work there do. And the patients that get treated there do. So that's the proper way to do things. You don't meet with a developer and tell them to change a window or change this. You tell them, hey, listen, if you want your project pushed through, that's an important building. You meet with them. Because they're the ones, they're the stakeholders. Their lives are affected every day once that project goes in. And I think you need to understand it's not just what you do, but it's how it's perceived. And that's just as important in government.
Good.
Okay, great.
Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions of audience questions. I know it's getting on toward 8:30, but we'll take 2 more questions and probably move on.
Okay, here's an audience question. I'm just going to read it. And it's Phil first, and
Yep.
then Andy. Okay, Phil. Pasadena Police Department adopted body cameras last year to enhance accountability and transparency. The city policy allows officers to turn the cameras on and off, despite citizens' proposals to mandate specific times the cameras should be on. Do you support mandating start and stop times to help rebuild trust in the Pasadena Police Department?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly consider it. I don't think, yeah. It was something, I'd have to see the direct language, but certainly I think any type of device that you have and the ability to manipulate what undermines people's confidence that it's actually capturing what it's intended to. Because, I mean, keep in mind, body cameras are there to not only protect the public, they're to protect police officers as well. So I would have to take a look at specifics, but I think that sounds like a great idea.
All right, thank you. Andy Wilson?
So the use of body cams went through exhaustive discussion at Public Safety Committee at City Council. I do not sit on that committee, and I'm certainly aware of the policy. I think the one that's frankly more controversial is whether police officers get to see them before they make a comment. Right? To me, that one is more concerning for me, and I can see arguments both ways. Obviously, Phil's been in combat. I've not. I can imagine when you're in a stressful situation, it's probably hard to recollect exactly what happened, and having a video as a cue can be helpful. At the same time, I have to tell you, going back to your point about perception, it's like, wow, I saw the video, and maybe the story is different. So these policies, these are new technologies, right? And I think understanding what's working, and this is going to go back to my point on best practices. Steve, you asked about this, or maybe Larry did, around asking what's happening, getting out of our cocoon of figuring out in our own city, but thinking about what's happening in other leading organizations and what their policies are. So that's where I go back to maybe not an auditor, but it's kind of what's going on. We're spending $70 million a year on your police force. We're buying new technology. Let's make sure we're not just buying stuff, we're using it in the most effective way to make sure our citizens are safe and our officers are doing the best work they can. So, let's toy with it over time and see what's working, right? Those things can be changed, and I think we have parties, as long as they're working in good faith, we'll come up with what's right for our community and the police officers.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last question is from an audience member. It'll go to Andy first. We'll take this last question, and then we'll have your 90-second finishes.
I hope it's a good one.
And it is a good one. That really is from the National to District 7. And I'm just going to read it, and it's well written. Given the caustic climate in politics at the national level, many of us in Pasadena are eager to preserve a cordial and respectful atmosphere in our nonpartisan political races. Please give me your impressions of this race and how it compares to the highly partisan negative campaigning that prevails at the national level.
Wow.
So, Andy, that's yours first.
It is a great question, and as I mentioned, this is my first rodeo. And if I were to be accused of one thing, it's certainly not being corrupt or having a lack of integrity. It's probably being naive. And as a community volunteer who's worked with so many incredible organizations and people, and so many residents, I expected this campaign to be one reflective of what the great esteem and great values I hold our city. And I was frankly, early on dispelled of that idea, to my great disappointment. What I'll tell Phil, and I'll tell this group publicly, is that when I decided with my family on Labor Day to run for election, I should say, I said, hey, if there's a great competitor who represents the values of our city, who brings the knowledge and relationships and frankly reflects our values, I would be happy to lose to that person. But seeing how this campaign has been waged, I'll tell you that I've worked harder, raised more money, engaged more people, because frankly, I think the way this campaign has been waged does not represent what is the best part of the values of our community, the values I hold so dearly. And I would ask all of you to ask yourself, now that you've seen us, now that you've seen their campaign, whether the ends justify the means, and I would say no. My integrity and kind of the esteem I hold the city is at a higher level, so I've been disappointed.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
That was swell, but let's calm down here, as David Letterman would say.
I can check
Phil.
off a couple people I'm not knocking on tomorrow.
Okay, Phil,
So always have a
your
sense of
answer.
humor.
40%, 2%. Actually, 53% of the people disagree. 57. The truth is hard. And when you see something wrong in your city, you stand up for it. You don't abide by some, I don't even know what policy it is, Pasadena way and all that stuff. But when people like Dr. Miller are being taken, these are my neighbors. I fight for my neighbors. I stand up for my neighbors.
Wow.
Please, no, catcalling from the audience.
Okay.
I fight for my neighbors.
Phil finish.
And I do, hey, listen, it's brutal. Yeah, I do it, and it's blunt truth. And all my website has every single document supporting what's on my mail. If you have a question, all the pieces of mail were retrieved by public records requests and are absolutely truthful. There's enough, information out there. I didn't need to put anything false, unfortunately. But I'm not running because this is a career decision I made. I'm not running because I thought this was a great way to blow $50,000. I'm running because I saw something I was wrong. And to expect me to somehow not put that out there is, and to just run, who's endorsed by the most people? It doesn't do our community any service. The way you improve a community is by running these types, by democracy, by clashes, by, perhaps as a lawyer, I'm too used to it, but that's how the best person wins. And you know what? Don't act all, higher than thou. Your surrogates, your paid campaign staff, labeling me as just this kooky Trump supporter, smearing me, telling me my wife's not really Mexican. I mean, just because it's not you doesn't mean it's not coming from you, and doesn't mean that you can't take ownership and responsibility of what your own campaign says. I've never complained about it because frankly, that's how politics works. But I'm not going to apologize for putting the issues out there, because 57% of the people, there was a 30% turnout here in District 7, 30% of the voters, 10% countywide, and 24% in District 5. Clearly, people are energized and feel the same way. They deserve to have a voice. They deserve to pick a side. They deserve to choose a guy that they feel is best, not just who has the most endorsements.
I think
Andy, are you asking for a rebuttal?
Yeah, I just think, the idea that they're facts and then they're alt facts, it's the innuendo, it's the misleading conclusions that I think, to me, they're offensive. Phil, you're a lawyer. I mean, I know that I'm a naive person, so I guess I feel like the intention of what people are doing and our good work should really carry, and that, once again, the ends don't justify the means. And I'm saying that I hope that we behave in a way that's reflective of our community, and the smear campaigns just don't reflect the Pasadena that I'm proud of, and I would encourage or discourage people from acting that way.
Okay. So now we have our last, our closing statements. So that will be Phil first, and then Andy, and we'll keep those to around 90 seconds. And sorry. No, I think.
Yeah, no, we're switching it around, right?
Right,
So
switching it around.
Yeah, okay. So, just to build on what was just said, I know in taken personally, certainly it's been not easy for me too. This hasn't been the best. I'm not a negative person. I do not like doing this to a guy who lives 3 streets away from me. But that kind of doesn't get to the real point, because this is not about him or me. This is about you. This is about my neighbors. This is about having a government that reflects what you guys want, and having a city council member that is doing the bidding for residents, that is doing what the residents want, that's not conflicted, that is, when you have a nonprofit that's receiving money from the city, there's bigger things to think about. There's kids up in the Northwest who had their infield tractor stolen, and the city telling them they can't afford to replace it. Well, how do these people feel when a bunch of rich people in District 7 are getting this money for innovative jobs? It doesn't seem fair. And you know what? People need to have confidence in the government. People need to know that their city council member is above the fray. And when there's just a question of that, that's when people don't think the government's working and a breakdown in the system happens. People don't trust police. People don't trust fire. They don't feel safe that the police aren't going to report them to immigration. It's a breakdown in the system. So it's about you guys. And even those clapping, I will represent you just as fervently as I will represent everybody else, because this is the way the process works, and I respect that, and I respect who you're voting for. But my reason I started running is because I saw a problem. I saw, money being given to the city. I saw neighbors not being consulted, and quite frankly, I see that the city is going in the wrong direction. Overdevelopment is going to change the small town feel of Pasadena. That's something that data cannot give. Data cannot communicate what a small town feels like. We need to get our city government under control, and we need to get it working for the residents again. Thank you very much, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
So I did learn something from Phil about doing public records requests. And I was curious, because Phil's passionate about helping our city do better. And I'm like, who is this guy who's so passionate? How is he being involved? What has he done? And when I asked, I said, give me the records, the public records of every meeting, every public testimony, every person who's been involved in any situation, whether it be a commission, subcommittee, 32 of them for the last 3 years. Do you know how many times Phil Haas's name showed up on that list? 0. 0. He's never advocated once. He shows up recently from Santa Monica and has all the answers. I'm telling you, Phil, I share.
Oh, okay, then.
Phil,
Living on Lake
Please
Winter.
don't interrupt your.
I would just tell you that if you're going to be a champion for our city, and we need champions. We need champions. You need to understand how the city works. Come to a meeting. Come to the South Lake Business District. Come to a public safety meeting. I actually saw Phil at his first meeting at the city council when we were talking about the Kimpton. I was pleased. He did look a little bored at times, but I can see how that would happen. He did, trust me.
You finally made a right decision, though.
Yeah. So, long story short, I've been volunteering in the city for 20 years because I care deeply. This is a place that's my home. My kids are here, my family's here, my parents are here. I moved 12 times before I got here. And when I tell kids at McKinley School or other schools when I talk about civics, if you love something, the best way to respect it is serve it. And I have 20 years of doing that. And I think we don't get it right, but I'd say I know their buildings were preserved. I know neighborhoods look better. We have opportunities for improvement. I agree with you, Phil. But in order to improve the system, you have to understand how the system works. And I invested 20 years in doing that. Phil's invested 6 months, and he's worked hard ringing doorbells, and I laud you for that. But I tell you, if you're really going to be an advocate, you're going to be a change agent, and I laud that. I'm an entrepreneur. I build companies. You have to understand what the system is that you have to change. Understand the general plan. Understand how public safety works. Understand how policies work. Then advocate. Then engage the citizens. Those are all public meetings. You can show up. Phil, you can show up. Have your voice heard. Please show up. Everyone in this room show up. If your voice is not being heard, it's because come out. They're on being broadcast. They're every Monday night, come down. Meet me for coffee. Meet me whenever. I'm here. But to come back and Monday morning quarterback and say we've screwed it all up because you just have all the answers is not fair. It's not fair to the people who work hard in this city, all the organizations who are trying to make our city better. And frankly, it's not fair to me. It's not fair to the people who are like me, who work hard and have built a legacy of service. So I just say, you can have someone who has all the answers. I think I know what the problems are. I think I know where the solutions are. It's bringing people together, it's working with integrity, and it's thinking about how we create a Pasadena that was as compelling for me when I got here 20 years ago, for the next generation. I think we're stewards. We got to take care of everyone in this room, but if we do a good job, I hope when my kids are 30 years old or 35 years old, they're coming back to a Pasadena that we all be proud of. And I will serve you in that way, and certainly we appreciate your vote on April 18th. Good job. Good job, Robert.